Tom Avery felt uneasy. He stood at the edge of the old cemetery. The air grew cold and the hair on his arms stood up. He felt watched. Tom's son, Ethan, stood beside him. Ethan was only 10. He didn't understand his father's fear. Ethan was excited. He loved a good mystery. The cemetery was ancient. Crumbling headstones leaned at odd angles. Weeds choked the graves. The place felt forgotten. "Come on, Dad," Ethan said. His voice was barely a whisper. The cemetery demanded silence. Tom swallowed his fear and followed his son. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the cemetery. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, a reminder of the countless souls resting beneath the ground. Shadows stretched across the graves, creating a haunting tableau. Tom shivered, feeling a chill run down his spine. He wanted to leave, the oppressive atmosphere weighing heavily on him. Ethan, however, was on a mission. His steps were purposeful, his eyes scanning the rows of tombstones with a determined glint. He had heard stories of an ancient grave, one that held secrets long forgotten. He was determined to find the oldest grave, the one that had eluded historians and treasure hunters alike. The thrill of discovery drove him forward, his heart pounding with anticipation. Ethan stopped in front of a large oak tree, its ancient branches spreading out like a guardian over the graves. This tree, he knew, was the key to his quest. Its branches were gnarled and twisted, each one telling a story of the years it had weathered. They seemed to whisper secrets to those who dared to listen. They looked like skeletal fingers reaching for the sky, a macabre reminder of the passage of time and the inevitability of death. At the base of the tree lay a flat stone, almost hidden by the roots that had grown over it. This was it, the grave he had been searching for. It was almost completely buried in the dirt, the passage of time having nearly erased its existence. But Ethan was undeterred. Ethan knelt and brushed the dirt away with careful, deliberate movements. Each sweep of his hand revealed more of the stone's surface. A name emerged from the grime. "Elias Carver," Ethan read aloud, his voice barely a whisper. The name sent a shiver down his spine. The date on the stone was barely visible, worn away by centuries of weather. 1699, Ethan whispered, his breath catching in his throat. He looked up at his father, his eyes wide with excitement. This was it, the discovery they had been hoping for. The unearthed grave of Elias Carver held the promise of untold stories and secrets waiting to be revealed. Tom felt a cold breath on the back of his neck. He turned quickly. Nothing was there. "Ethan, it's getting late," he said, his voice strained. "We should go." Ethan ignored him. He was now trying to move the stone. It was heavy, much heavier than it should have been. Tom watched as his son struggled. He felt a growing sense of dread. He wished they had never come here. With a final heave, Ethan shifted the stone. The ground beneath it caved in. A deep, dark hole was revealed. A foul smell rose from the pit. It smelled like death. Ethan held his breath against the stench. He peered into the darkness. "What is that?" he whispered. He thought he saw something move down there, something dark and shapeless. Tom joined his son. He looked into the hole. He couldn't see anything, but he could hear it. A low, guttural growl rose from the darkness. It sent shivers down his spine. "Ethan," Tom said, his voice tight with fear, "step away from the hole." His words were cut short. The growling grew louder. It was joined by a scratching sound. Something was climbing out of the grave. Ethan stumbled back from the edge of the pit. His eyes were wide with terror. He had never heard a sound like that before. It wasn't human. It was something else. Something evil. A clawed hand shot out of the darkness. It grasped the edge of the hole. The creature began to pull itself out. Tom grabbed Ethan's arm. "Run!" he yelled. They turned and ran. They didn't look back. The sound of the creature's enraged roar echoed behind them. It was a sound that promised pain. It was a sound that promised death. Section 6. A Father's Instinct. Tom ran. He ran with a desperation that only a father could understand, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he pushed his body to its limits. The night was dark, the forest around him a blur of shadows and indistinct shapes. But Tom didn't care. All that mattered was getting away, putting as much distance as possible between them and the danger that lurked behind. He ran faster than he had ever run before. His feet pounded the forest floor, each step a testament to his determination. The branches and underbrush clawed at his clothes, but he barely noticed. His mind was focused on one thing: keeping Ethan safe. The sound of their pursuers' footsteps echoed in his ears, a constant reminder of the peril they were in. He pulled Ethan along with him. The boy's small hand was clasped tightly in his own, a lifeline in the darkness. Ethan stumbled, his short legs struggling to keep up with his father's frantic pace. But Tom couldn't slow down. He couldn't afford to. Every second counted. Ethan was small for his age. His legs were short. Each step was a struggle for the young boy, but he didn't complain. He trusted his father completely, knowing that Tom would do everything in his power to protect him. The fear in Ethan's eyes mirrored Tom's own, but there was also a spark of determination. They would get through this together. Tom knew they couldn't outrun this thing, not for long. The creature was relentless, its pursuit unyielding. He glanced over his shoulder, his heart sinking as he saw the dark shape gaining on them. They needed a plan, a way to escape that didn't rely on speed alone. But in the chaos of the moment, Tom's mind was blank. All he could do was keep running. They reached the edge of the cemetery. The old wrought iron gates loomed before them, a barrier between them and potential safety. Tom's heart leaped with a glimmer of hope. If they could just get inside, they might be able to find a place to hide, to regroup and come up with a plan. But as they approached, his hope was dashed. The old iron gates were locked. Tom rattled the gates. They wouldn't budge. Panic surged through him as he pulled and pushed, trying to force them open. But it was no use. The gates were solid, unyielding. He could feel the creature getting closer, its presence a dark shadow on the edge of his awareness. He turned to face their pursuer. There was no other choice. They were trapped, and the only way to protect Ethan was to confront the danger head-on. Tom's mind raced as he tried to think of a way to buy them some time. He needed to keep the creature at bay, to give Ethan a chance to escape. He had to buy Ethan some time. Every second counted. Tom positioned himself between his son and the approaching threat, his body a shield. He could feel Ethan's small hands clutching at his shirt, the boy's fear palpable. But Tom couldn't let that fear paralyze him. He had to be strong for both of them. Tom grabbed a fallen branch. It was the only weapon he could find, a makeshift tool in the face of overwhelming odds. He hefted it in his hands, feeling the rough wood beneath his fingers. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. He had to make it work. It was rotten and weak. The wood crumbled slightly under his grip, a reminder of its fragility. But Tom didn't have the luxury of being picky. He had to use what he had, no matter how inadequate it seemed. He tightened his grip, steeling himself for the confrontation. But it was all he had. Tom knew that the branch wouldn't hold up for long, but he hoped it would be enough to give them a fighting chance. He positioned himself, ready to strike. His heart pounded in his chest, each beat a reminder of what was at stake. He stood his ground, his heart pounding in his chest. The fear was there, a constant companion, but it was tempered by a fierce determination. He would not let this creature harm his son. He would fight with everything he had, no matter the cost. He would protect his son. That was the only thought in his mind. The love he felt for Ethan was a powerful force, driving him to stand firm in the face of danger. He would do whatever it took to keep his son safe, even if it meant facing the creature alone. He would die before he let anything hurt him. Tom's resolve was unshakable. He knew that this might be the end, but he was prepared to make that sacrifice. For Ethan, he would face any danger, endure any pain. He would fight until his last breath, because that was what it meant to be a father. Section 7. The Price of Curiosity. The creature emerged from the shadows. It was tall and skeletal. Its skin was stretched tight across its bones. It looked like a walking corpse. Its eyes glowed red in the fading light. The creature opened its mouth. Rows of razor-sharp teeth gleamed in the darkness. It spoke in a voice that dripped with malice. "You should not have disturbed my rest," it hissed. Ethan watched in horror. He had never seen anything like it. He had never imagined anything like it. He realized now the truth of his father's fear. This place was evil, and they had awakened something terrible. Section 8. Trapped. The night was thick with an unsettling silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves. The cemetery, bathed in the pale glow of the moon, seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something to happen. The creature lunged at Tom, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. It moved with a speed and ferocity that took Tom by surprise, its claws outstretched and ready to tear into him. Tom swung the branch with all his might, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the adrenaline coursing through his veins, giving him a burst of strength he didn't know he had. The branch shattered into 1,000 pieces, splinters flying in all directions. Tom stumbled back, his mind racing to find another way to defend himself. The creature was upon him, its weight pressing down on him, making it hard to breathe. Tom could feel its hot breath on his face, the stench of decay filling his nostrils. Tom closed his eyes and braced for the end. He could hear his own heartbeat, loud and frantic, as he waited for the inevitable pain. He waited for the pain. It never came. He opened his eyes. The creature was gone. He looked around. The cemetery was silent. The air was still, as if the world had paused for a moment. The only sound was Ethan's ragged breathing. Tom turned to his son, his heart aching at the sight of him. Tom looked at his son. Ethan was pale. He was shaking. But he was alive. They had survived. This time. Tom knew they couldn't stay here any longer. The danger was too great. "We need to leave," Tom said, his voice hoarse. He could feel the urgency in his words, the need to get his son to safety. He helped Ethan to his feet, his hands trembling as he did so. He could see the fear in his son's eyes, the same fear that he felt deep inside. They walked towards the gates, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Tom kept a firm grip on Ethan, not wanting to let go for even a second. As they reached the gates, they swung open. The creaking sound was almost deafening in the quiet night, as if something wanted them to leave. Tom didn't question it. He just wanted to get as far away from this place as possible. He took a deep breath and stepped through the gates, holding Ethan close. Section 9. The Things Best Left Buried. Tom and Ethan walked home in silence. The setting sun cast long shadows behind them. They looked like two ghosts walking among the living. They had looked into the abyss, and the abyss had looked back. They never spoke of what they had seen that night. But they both knew that some things are best left buried. Some secrets are not meant to be unearthed, and some graves should never be opened.